George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Khalid Bey is in the house. So he was on the Syracuse Common Council for about 10 years, ran for mayor this past election. It didn't happen. Doesn't mean it's over, but it didn't happen this time. But he went back to something he was doing for a minute. Now, before we get to that, let me just say, I don't know if you remember this, Khalid, but then when I first became aware of you and your work in the streets, it was back in 2003. I don't know if I told you the story. And we did a community violence series in Syracuse, and we had a forum at the On Center. Oh no, Dunbar Center and On Center. Dunbar Center and On Center. And I remember you speaking at Dunbar Center, saying something to the effect of parents or children only see what their parents reflect, something profound. I was like, that brother deep back in the day. And I was like, who is that brother over there? But you were on camera, you spoke, everybody knew that they were going to be on camera. And I do remember we did a series of community forums when I was the director of community affairs at WCNY. So that's where, we first became familiar with each other. And it was actually the first year that I kicked off Inspiration for the Nation. So that's 19 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember those interviews. I remember those shows.
Back in the day. So you back in the studio. What's going on? The most talented, and from the cuts, and we'll hit them up with a little sample in a minute. But the most talented is back in the building. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, somebody asked me before, they was like, oh, I didn't know you were still recording. And my response was, chefs cook, painters paint.
Right.
Right. And MCs will always MC. It doesn't matter who's listening. So you never really stopped. What I stopped doing was putting music out for consideration.
Mm-hmm.
You always have an involvement, and you always listen and keep your ear to the ground to see what's happening, especially for people of our generation. We are those true hip hop connoisseurs. We know what it is. We know what's required. And so I've always done it. And even in 2020, during the pandemic, October 2020, I had released an EP for the first time since 2003. While locked away in the house, titled The Beacon. And this is actually the second one that I've done since kind of getting back to it. So yeah, it's kind of like breathing, man. You do it and you make a song, you might as well do something with it. So you throw it out there, see who like it, George.
Your time is kind of impeccable, because we just had people arguing one of the top Super Bowl halftime performances of all time, and you had OGs, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, although Dre is, and it was interesting watching all of these brothers are like billionaires, millionaires coming from the streets, hip hop. 50 with the Flavor Unit, G Unit Productions and TV, and the Power franchise that's, basically made the Stars Network. I won't say made it, but it's definitely keeping them afloat, right?
That's a fact. Yeah.
You got Mary J. Blige. You got obviously Eminem, the top selling rapper of all time. Dr. Dre, Apple just paid him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And Snoop Dogg, of course, an icon. Kendrick Lamar coming up on his own dime, and obviously, so all of. So I'm thinking, and so here you come, right?
Right.
I was in the lab before that halftime show, but in some ways, it's sort of a going back to the future kind of thing for you, it seems.
It really is, and it's funny because I knew you would bring up the halftime show, the timing,
right?
That's our generation right there. I mean, me and Mary J. Blige is the same age. In fact, I think she's about 9 days older than me. But just to see, Dre 56 and Mary J 51, and I didn't know Eminem was 49 and 50 Cent 46. You got the middle-aged guys, and the middle-aged sister there. But really showing what hip hop is about, and when you can't ignore the golden age. You can't ignore the 90s, and what it meant for hip hop. And so Just to come from that era, to be, even though I started rhyming in the 80s, to be a part of that particular generation, that Generation X, which brought so much to the world in the way of creativity, not just in music, but just in general. It's an honor to be a part of that group, man. That's a fact.
And what it shows you, I mean, and when hip hop started, there was real conversation about whether hip hop would last, right? And
Right.
what was also interesting to me, what I saw was the sort of that there wasn't a beef, right? Because we sort of see East Coast and West Coast as a beef, right? So you got Dre and Snoop West Coast, but then you have 50 and Mary J. Blige, and then you got Eminem in the middle, right?
Eminem in the middle, right?
Right. And Kendrick, obviously, West Coast. So
right.
this notion, and then of course we know that Jay-Z wrote "Still Dre," which I didn't know that. I know I guess I'm not really pure in the game because I didn't know that. but it was good to see that. Was that something that you noticed as well?
Yeah, the thing that was probably most appealing to me was the excitement that the audience displayed. The fact that people really, appreciated, those who are a little behind us in age, got a real feel for what the energy was like. When we were, when the golden age was upon us, and hip hop was what it was, and ultimately still is what it is. All things come full circle. And then even when you look at the various styles over the years, the South and the like, I say this with due respect, all MCs ultimately face East. I'm talking about their delivery, their production. It always ends up sounding like they're from the Northeast. And I say that again with due respect, but when you look at the delivery ability of Ludacris is a dope MC,
Dirty South.
Dirty South, but even when you look at how Lil Wayne rhymes, you look at, the game and his talent, like these guys rhyme, you couldn't tell if they was from Brooklyn or from California or from Atlanta, and that's the dope thing about the creativity and the ability for people to kind of fall in the pocket and deliver it in a way that has some real value. One thing I'll say that you said, just to echo it, the sustenance was different. Hip hop was a full contact sport. It was always about teaching from the beginning, but it was always competitive. It wasn't a lot of beef. That was a fairly new thing. But to be able to see that, to see those guys perform, see that appreciation, but to see how seamless the performance was. Yeah. No stop and go with people coming on stage, but experience hip hop in the way that we do it. Seamless performance. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, talking to Khalid Bey, reminisce about hip hop because Khalid just put out an EP. I'm gonna go back to something you said about like this all pointing east. So this came to me. What about Migos, right? The mumble rap kind of thing. Where does that fit in all of this? Now they might say that's not what they're doing, but
Well, I always try to be as nice as possible. I respect the person's creativity.
They're getting paid, right?
Yeah, they're expressing themselves, man,
right,
in their way. I don't listen to it. Due respect, but many people do. And hip hop has its extension, right? It's expanded. Let's call a spade a spade. You have many people who may not be of the hip hop culture, who may not be fans of hip hop. But let's put it out there. All rock beats are hip hop now.
Country, right?
Right. All country beats are hip hop now. Country artists are rhyming on their songs, right?
Right.
All pop music is hip hop drum tracks and the like now. So however you like it, whether you call it mumble, whether you call it pop, country music, it's all hip hop today.
Let's talk about you before we get back to the music. So the mayor's race didn't work out for you. What did you learn from that?
Nothing. The thing is, I've been in it long enough, me and the mayor had a talk after the election, and I said this to him. I said, the thing that's interesting about humanity is that people always have this habit of assigning onto you what they believe constitutes a win or a loss, what constitutes a good feeling or a bad feeling, what pain may be. And so many people have tried to assign to me how they would have felt had they been unsuccessful in the election. I didn't have that struggle. I lost an election before. I know what it's like. And what I said that night, I made very clear. I know it's hard to really grasp, but the minute I saw that he had reached the win number, this is even before I conceded, I had already moved on. And it's really that simple. You can't get yesterday back. I said from the beginning, I know how to do the job, but I don't have to be the guy. People have a right to choose, even if their choice isn't me, I respect it. And I mean that. I mean that even today. And so it was very easy for me to move on. I can't say that I learned anything from that specific election. I learned more when I first ran. That was a real trauma. That was the real culture shock for me when I first ran in 2005 and lost. So I understand the game. I understand how it works. I always say I'm more of an operative than a candidate. So, it's really easy for me to determine where the math is going on an election day as the numbers are coming in and what our shot is. In fact, it was unpredictable until the last month, until the numbers started coming in. Even the mayor said the same thing. Nobody knew which way the tide would go.
Right.
But it went in his direction, and it is what it is.
And overwhelmingly so. So what does that mean, that you're done, or you got 4 years?
Well, I said when I announced that it would win or lose, it would be my last run.
Okay.
I think people just didn't believe me, but my time as an elected official has run its course.
Mm-hmm.
I have, people always say, what you going to do now? And I jokingly say, but I mean it, I have a life. I've done a lot of things before I ran for office. In fact, many of you have known me before I ran for office. So I'm fine, man. I got a life. I like being on the private side, though it's not totally private. But, I have a business I'm involved in. I pay my bills, take care of my responsibilities, man, and I keep going. And I enjoy every single day.
You still involved with the football?
Yes. In fact, we're getting ready to start practice on March 29th. Our first game kicks off May 21st. I'm looking forward to it.
Syracuse strong, right?
Syracuse strong, minor league football. In fact, I was doing a commercial treatment today. So
you got where were you home? Where will you play this year?
We're at Sunnycrest up at Henniger High School.
Sunnycrest this year. All right, good. All right.
Yeah.
East side, good to see that. When you think about you going back into the lab, I'm saying going back into the lab to do your music. Most Talented is your stage name, and I was listening to some of the tracks, and we'll play in a minute or shortly, and even calling you Mo, right? Just very interesting. But what are you saying now? This is not your first one, your second one, but at this stage of the game, right? Like you said, I'm middle-aged now. So what are you talking about that, and who are you talking to right now?
Well, when I did The Beacon, which I would arguably say was probably the best performance I've done because of the content, right? The Beacon, obviously, we know that the beacon means a light, a guiding light in that sense, was really like an expose and or explanation on my personal travels, intellectually, right, spiritually, but the big message there was, the same thing that I'm saying about me applies to you, right? And it was really an effort to kind of empower and uplift, and give people some perspective. I'm very proud of that one. Dawn, which follows The Beacon, of course, was to get back to the full contact sport, hip hop and what it was from the beginning. It's always been the competitive nature of hip hop. I wanted to get back to that. And so Dawn, but while The Beacon focused on a person's internal responsibility, the Dawn is more so the external, kind of getting back into it. And every once in a while, I still attempt to educate, or I crack a joke about how somebody may not be as alert as they should be. I was saying, I was speaking at a public administration class at Maxwell, Dr. Grant Reher, Professor Grant Reher, I'm sorry. And, we were talking about
He's a doctor.
Yeah. We were talking about the Super Bowl halftime show and just music in general. And I mentioned the same thing to him. I said, because he asked me about the election and whether I thought that there was an attempt by some media to paint hip hop as a bad thing and stick it to me. I said, of course they did.
Oh, yeah.
I said, and people who don't understand hip hop peg or hip hop gangster rap. What they don't understand is that gangster rap is a West Coast thing. That is not an East Coast thing. That is not New York.
Right.
You know, and so that they don't understand that. They assign that to what we do over here in the East, and they're wrong, and they don't even know that they're wrong. You know, but people who understand hip hop and the culture, you know, we see what you try to do, but it still means nothing. Hip hop is the greatest music there is. And we keep it moving, we keep going, and hopefully its impact, you know, will continue to grow.
Why do you say it's the greatest music there is? Because
it talks to everybody. It talks across generations. You know, while other genres have had that impact to some degree, they all fizzled out. What has been the bridge, or more so the support, the stilts, if you will, to bring those genres back? It's that boom bap, right? Hip hop has resurrected and have brought a lot of those things back up to speed, those other genres back up to speed. You know, and hip hop still, though, speaks the language across genre. You're talking about at least 4 or 5 generations, you know, that are immediately touched by hip hop music, and is the choice, you know, of music to listen to. And so, you know, it's the right vehicle for delivering a message. You know, certainly some people haven't delivered the right message, right? But I think people have to be a little bit more responsible, not to try to peg all hip hop as any kind of thing that's negative. In the same way that they don't negatively pigeonhole pop music or rock music or any other genre.
So you talked about Dawn. You sent me this track, so let me hit him up with a little bit of this.
All right.
Yeah. Smokes. Try to get these cats to Beacon, enlighten them a little bit. They wasn't ready. So we're gonna do it this way. Shout out to Seth Marcel. Yeah. Let's do it. He's always imitated, but never duplicated. You wanna be the favorite, but you're always complicated. Wanna be seen as the dean, but you overrated. Let Mo show you how it's done to get you motivated. Never assimilated. I prove it like I say it. You ask the people how we do, they say he dominated. That there get you faded, get you eliminated. Your brain's constipated, my mind's elevated. The most imbued with the truth, boy, I'm obligated to God. Woke up from the seed where I germinated. You feel it nominated. You like the song and play it. It's on. Welcome to the dawn, son. Glad you made it. You say you conversated. I say your grammar's jaded. You think it's slow, but the most can get you educated. You rap a slow.
I'm seeing you. I see. So tell me about Seth Marcel and what he had to do with it.
So Seth produced that track right there. You know, right after I finished, Seth is actually the person who mixed and mastered the Beacon for me as well. Eddie James, EJ Dardell produced every single track on the Beacon. But Seth produced that track right there. You know, Seth is a phenomenal talent, MC and producer. And he's and DJ, right? That's how he started. And he sent me some things literally while we were still mixing the Beacon. Like, hey, you know, because I was considering doing a second EP, so he sent me some joints, and I turned that one on really after I had, because I got most of the production came from some of my guys in New Jersey, you know, and so but I turned Seth beats on, and that one just jumped out to me, and so I just leaned on it. I had to shout him out because that's my man, that's my brother.
Let me ask you, there's 2 things that came up. So we talked about like the unity, but 50, and he takes people out. He goes to like the whole thing with Ja Rule, and I mean so I don't know about all that unity, because that, when you say competitive, this dude, he's like eliminate you, right? What you think about that?
Well, you know, I said it, George. Hip hop has always been a full contact sport.
It's full contact sport.
It's always been competitive, man, and that's just been the name of the game. I remember back in the days when I was a teenager, and you know, and in the young 20s, it was always a cipher somewhere, right. Battles somewhere, you know. But the respect was there, and everybody went home afterwards, you know. And so, you know, it was always that way. It was just, you know, you're talking right in the midst. Hip hop really rose at the same time break dancing was at was reaching its peak. Right. You know, so everything was a battle, everything was competition. We were break dancing, and the guys would stand up and rhyme too. you know, on the cardboard on what used to be Castle Street,
Okay.
down in Central Village, in Central Village, that was always the thing, the competition between the different sides of town. And I'll even mention at one time when I was signed to Relativity Records, I had put together a group called the Ruffians that had people from each side of town. And this was in the thick of a lot of conflict back in the days. You had guys from the Bricks, the East Side, the West Side, who were all in the same group, and they got some radio spins and it really brought people together. So it has this value in terms of unity. We did a show at what used to be the Country Club on Pearl Street with all of those neighborhoods in the same building without a single conflict in the midst of conflict. So you got to think about that. It definitely brings people together, but let's not get it confused. It's like football. It's full contact.
We've had a couple of shows in town. Who was it? Betty was here, not Future was here, a couple, and someone else was just here in Syracuse. What do you think about, well, I got 3 questions in my head. Let me go to the one that I want to do. Let me do this. Let me pause and say we'll have more with Khalid Bey right after this. George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation.